in order to get good opportunities in this market, you need to be in early and you need to be able to really be seen as the go-to expert so you can educate and build trust with them throughout the full buyer journey. So by the time that lead is advanced all the way to opportunity, you've tremendously stacked the decks in your company's favor. And it's also equally important to recognize that that 28 touch points, the couple dozen touch points between complete stranger and purchase, is a really big deal. A lot of companies in and around the data center industry invest very aggressively in field marketing and event marketing. What this means is someone can have an amazing experience at a conference where you had a cocktail party one evening or a golf tournament or a cabana party or something like that, or even gave a great keynote or a breakout session or something like that. As impactful as that is, that's just one of 28 touch points.
Hey there, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. A little while back, we hosted a webinar called How to Market and Sell to CTOs and CIOs, Chief Technology Officers and Chief Information Officers. Immediately following that webinar, I hosted an informal Q&A question and answer session where I addressed a handful of questions, including how to find the right CTO or CIO decision maker, how to improve CTO and CIO lead generation for a data center related business, how to create a compelling CTO or CIO value proposition with your data center messaging, how to understand the budgeting process for new data center projects, as well as how to convince hyperscale customers to give up on self-construction. Let's listen in.
The first question is, how do we find the right contact? How do we engage decision makers and push the needle with the right decision makers? I think what's super important is when it comes to finding the right decision makers, recognize that if you do your go-to-market and your content strategy and sales enablement strategy and event strategy, all aligned around positioning you, your team, and your company as the definitive experts in your area of specialization with what you do for your clients, a lot of great things will come on very, very many levels. For starters, more of the right people will find you. Second, the people that are clogging up your sales pipeline, your deals board, and not moving forward, they will be better nurtured because you'll have an opportunity to continue educating and building trust with them. You'll be able to gain a role in many, many of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decisions. So you, your team, your company has an enormous window of opportunity to be able to influence how they evaluate all of the options that are in front of you. And done well, this almost guarantees your company a place on the short list with this particular team, with this company for your product or service. And when it's done at an elite level, there may even be opportunities where your content and your events are so insanely helpful and have such a powerful impact on how they now compare the options that are in front of them, that the short list collapses down to one. And by the time that particular prospect or client jumps from awareness to consideration and consideration to decision, you have already won. You've effectively neutralized all of the competitive options because essentially your salespeople showed up and the interactions that they had with prospects and clients were so insanely valuable that it felt like free consulting. It didn't feel like they were engaging with a salesperson or account executive or sales development rep from an IT company or facilities company or a data center operator. Instead, your prospects or clients felt like they were talking to someone who was a highly paid consultant from like KPMG or Deloitte or EY or PwC or something like that. It was that incredibly valuable. That's part of the reason why I mentioned when we were talking about the role of CTOs and CIOs, some very recent conversations that I had with executives at Phoenix and DataBank talking about how their sales teams really, they don't quite need to be at the level of a CTO, but they need to be educated enough and keeping their skills sharp enough that they can have really interesting, insightful conversations with the CTOs and certainly the people that work on their teams, their direct reports and second level reports. So yeah, like cybersecurity, being able to understand network infrastructure, racks, trends with power, cooling, all that stuff, incredibly important. But yeah, at a high level, if you want to be able to find the right contacts, engage decision makers, your content and event strategy is incredibly important. Being able to understand their biggest goals, their biggest challenges, being able to deliver value at a really high level. And then it's a very simple ask to be able to, once they've converted on your landing page, say, like, who else should be reading this? Who else should be watching this? Who else should attend? And you'd be shocked, that simple email, how effective it is on getting to the rest of the committee. And you'll know you're doing this well because when you go in for your first meeting, they are quoting you. They like used your ebook as the textbook. They used your webinars as the courses, and they're using your methodology to guide what they're doing going forward. So they've gotten such an outrageously high level of value from you during the pre-sales context that has paved the way for your content to spread throughout the decision committee. That's what it takes to find the right contacts, to find the right decision makers. And what screws up a lot of people with this is your content, like let's say, for example, the first person who consumes your content is pretty entry level, maybe even an intern, and they give up and like, this isn't working. I'm like, I don't know about that. So the thing is, it depends on the company size. Obviously, getting an entry level contact in a 5-person IT department and a 50-person company or 200-person company is very different than an entry level contact in a Fortune 1000 company. But at the end of the day, almost certainly someone in an entry level role was tasked with an assignment to go out and do research on this category. By building a relationship with that person and earning their trust by you being seen as the educational resource, you will almost certainly be able to get the lay of the land as to what's actually going on internally within that company. In many cases, that person will introduce you to their colleagues, their bosses. They pass your content around. So be really, really, really careful to not get too snotty, to not get too arrogant with all of this, is that any contact in a target account who is showing interest in your content, who's showing interest in your educational events, can have a profound impact in you getting to the rest of the decision committee, even if that person is just a supporting role and doesn't actually sit on the committee, but is reporting to someone who's on the committee. Next question. What do we do to improve lead generation? When it comes to marketing and selling to CTOs and CIOs, the most important way to improve lead generation is to first make sure that your definition of a lead is the same as the rest of your team. Because people that work in marketing technology and sales enablement have different categories that describe different kinds of contacts in your CRM, your customer relationship management system. And a lead is usually pretty early stage. As someone hits a certain threshold where they've shown some fit and interest regarding qualification, that lead will often be advanced to what's called an MQL, or a marketing qualified lead, as someone from the sales team manually reviews that and decides that, oh yeah, this looks pretty good, we're going to accept it. So it's sometimes called a sales accepted lead, an SAL, or a sales qualified lead, a sales accepted lead, or sales qualified lead. That's another level down in the funnel. And then once someone from your sales team has met with them and determined that, oh yeah, this looks really good, there's for sure a deal to be done here. And based on my initial conversation or two, I'm going to guesstimate a forecasted close date. I'm going to guesstimate a forecasted deal size. That's when it advances to opportunity. The challenge is a lot of people use all of these terms interchangeably, when in reality, a lot of times people are confusing, and what they really mean is they want to improve their opportunity generation and not just their lead generation. However, to do this right in today's marketplace, to be able to arrive as early as possible, as often as possible, with the right people, so that you're seen as a trusted advisor, an educator, and a subject matter expert, even if that means dismissing your immediate interests of trying to put everyone immediately into a sales process where you can close them in X number of days or X number of weeks. No, you need to meet them where they are. And many times where they are is they know they have a goal they're trying to figure out, that if they get right will get them a big promotion. They know they have a challenge or a bunch of stressors that are driving them nuts, that are ruining their nights and weekends and ruining their work-life balance and really annoying their family because their vacation is snatched away from their having private, quiet enjoyment with their family. So once you have consensus on that, it becomes a lot easier to develop a editorial calendar and events calendar that's delivering just outrageous levels of value throughout the full buyer's journey. But it's really important in order to get good opportunities in this market, you need to be in early. And you need to be able to really be seen as the go-to expert so you can educate and build trust with them throughout the full buyer's journey. So by the time that lead is advanced all the way to opportunity, you've tremendously stacked the decks in your company's favor. And it's also equally important to recognize that 28 touch points, the couple dozen touch points between complete stranger and purchase is a really big deal. A lot of companies in and around the data center industry invest very aggressively in field marketing and event marketing. What this means is someone can have an amazing experience at a conference where you had a cocktail party one evening or a golf tournament or a cabana party or something like that, or even gave a great keynote or a breakout session or something like that. As impactful as that is, that's just one of 28 touch points. That means there's 27 more things that person is going to do between complete stranger and when they purchase. So the question is your company prepared to be in a lot more of those touch points, or you're leaving it to chance that they might come back? The leaving it to chance that they might come back is a pretty risky proposition, because no matter how great that experience is, there's a really good chance that they're not waiting till next year's conference. They're not going to wait 364 days. So we need to figure out a way to continue educating and building trust with them long after that event is happening. And that's a problem that I've been working with some of the biggest event companies in this industry on for the better part of a decade now. And some companies do well at it. Some companies are doing an abysmal job at it, and they're basically throwing $1,000 bills or $10,000 bills literally through the shredder when they go and participate in some of these events. You need a plan for how you're going to engage and segment and stay in front of and build relationships with these folks over time if you really want to be able to truly monetize from lead to sales qualified to opportunity and ultimately to new client. And then there's a whole separate kind of lead generation that comes up post-purchase, where your account managers, your customer success get involved with onboarding, with helping your new clients get from initial value to intended value to extended value, to introducing them to other products and services that you have available, all the cross-sell, upsell, expansion revenue type of stuff. So that's a completely different kind of lead generation, a different deals board. But nevertheless, it requires a lot of the same thought process of understanding what it takes to help them achieve their milestone, developing a content strategy, developing an event strategy. So this is why it's so important to be able to segment based on who they are and where they are in the journey with your company, if you want to be able to knock it out of the park with lead generation.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
So next question is, what does it take to create a compelling value proposition? What does it take to improve messaging? So if you're serious about marketing and selling more effectively to CTOs and CIOs, and you want to improve your messaging, the most important thing that I can tell you is to get really good at empathy. Understand what's going on in their lives that you can actually help them with. It's kind of, if you think about a spectrum from selfish jerk to incredibly helpful consultant, most people are somewhere in the middle, or at least nobody gets up in the morning in a sales role and says, I want to be perceived by my prospects and clients as a selfish jerk. So let's assume that you're somewhere in the middle on that continuum. What we want to try to do is get you to helpful subject matter expert, teacher, trusted advisor, consultant, and thought leader as rapidly as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is to spend more time learning about their goals, learning about their needs, learning about their challenges, and interacting with them. If you go to live events and you have the opportunity to chat with the right people in the right context, it can be great. At the absolute minimum, You should be reading, listening, and watching. What you're going to right now can help you tremendously with understanding what's going on inside the minds of CTOs and CIOs that you're trying to build relationships with. But as I mentioned during the core webinar, as you're actually researching and building and documenting your buyer persona documents, they can't be in thin air. They need to literally be sitting in a Google Doc or something like that. And if they're done well, they could be a page, usually for most companies that are selling a high ticket item with a considered purchase decision. They're usually going to be multi-pages. One that is done well, that gives you the consensus on a representative sample of people in that cohort of people in that persona group of what they need to figure out to help them get to the next level in their career, their goals, what they need to do to help them earn a promotion, their goals, what they're struggling with the most, their challenges. And all of that will help you come up with a content strategy, an editorial calendar, an events plan to be able to deliver as much value as possible. If you want to next level above and beyond that, and you probably, if you've heard me talk before, I talk about the idea of double dipping and triple dipping. What that means is you come up with something you invest in once that gives you yields 2, 3, 4 times. So one of the interesting triple, double dipping kind of opportunities that you have as you're trying to improve your messaging, as you're trying to resonate more with your buyer personas, is, at the risk of getting a little meta like this, is you have your buyer personas, and you could potentially either do research reports where you send out surveys to those folks and compile it together into PDFs and excerpts and blogs and video versions and webinar versions. You could also start a podcast for your most important kind of buyer persona, where each week you interview someone different. They could be a combination of prospects and clients, and you're getting to know them better. If you work in any kind of product related role, chances are I should hope you're already having a lot of conversations like this to figure out your user stories, to figure out what goes into your sprints and your epics, and to help prioritize your resources. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of value from conducting these kinds of interviews, because usually when you do this right, you, within 5, 10, 20 people that you're talking to, you should start to notice patterns and insights. And that makes it so the more you get deeper into this, the more valuable your insights become to all of the prospects and clients that you engage with. And people will almost feel like they're talking to a Gartner or Forrester or an IDC analyst after a while, because you're starting to see these macro trends that allow you not only to answer the questions that your prospects and clients have, but to see 2, 3, 4, 5, 28 steps ahead of where they are right now, because you've seen the pattern recognition on what this kind of role, what this kind of CTO or CIO is most concerned about in a company in their location of that size and that kind of business model and that kind of industry. Because you start to see patterns. And then that's, again, where it doesn't feel like they're attending a discovery call with you. It doesn't feel like you're exploring so you can put together a proposal and pitch them or something. It really does truly feel like they're engaging with a enterprise consultant who's just sharing outrageously valuable insights with them on what you've observed from other companies similar to theirs. So that for sure will help you improve your value proposition, your messaging, your explaining what you do. Another big thing that I'd recommend is, a lot of companies really never get good at figuring out what business they're truly in. And there's a bunch of different frameworks for this, but the one that I'm the biggest fan of is called the job to be done. This was a framework that was developed in the 2010s and got a lot more popular at Harvard Business School by a gentleman, the late Clayton Christensen. And what the job to be done means is that you really are figuring out, what is the job that your clients are hiring your company to do? And when they do that, what are they essentially firing the competitive options, the other alternatives that are in front of them? And when you have a better idea of what the job is that you're truly doing for your clients, when they're doing something and they're frustrated about something, they hire your company for this reason, to do this because it makes them be able to do this. When you're able to better, this is again something that product managers and sales enablement professionals will spend a lot of time on, but it's something that can be super useful to you as well, because we know there's like surface level symptoms, and then we know there's deeper diagnoses, and then really getting deeper and deeper and deeper to really understand and unravel what is going on at the company. So at the deepest level, what's super important is spending more time with your clients, increasing the frequency that you do that. It gives you more data, gives you more touch points, and helps you learn and iterate faster. And that alone can make an enormous difference in coming up with content and event strategy and messaging that resonates a lot better. How do we understand the budgeting process for new data center projects? Understanding the budgeting process for new data center projects. Well, there's pattern recognition that will for sure come up across different companies that are of a similar size and a similar kind of location and a similar kind of business model. But understand that a lot of companies have different budgeting processes and can for sure know that at some point it's going to hit like a CFO or a finance team, probably in operations, depending on the size of the company. The CEO is probably involved in some way, shape, or form. But the reality is, if you're trying to get in those early conversations to be top of mind when they're thinking about budgeting, one of the best things that you can do for your ideal client profile, for your target list of companies, is to develop an educational resource that helps those potential clients think through how they go through the budgeting process. It could be an ebook. It could be a downloadable template. It could be an interactive tool on your website. It could be a webinar. So essentially, if you don't have that expertise internally, consider engaging with a consultant that can help you build that. Consider doing a series of interviews or podcast interviews to help get that skill set. But think about how you flesh out who is on the decision committee that goes into budgeting for new data center projects. For sure, it is a technology executive. It's going to be a finance executive. It's probably somebody that ultimately would take over facilities. If your company has anyone in a construction role or real estate role, they're in on that conversation. There's probably some site selection expertise that comes into play as well. And again, all of this is the individual roles, individual functions, and how many different hats a single person will wear is very highly dependent on the company size. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to get in early and get in there often and be top of mind, so you're seen as the experts on helping to figure all of this stuff out, it can be very, very worthwhile to invest in building an educational resource and getting that in front of those target companies. And once you develop the resource, getting it in front of the target companies, sure, is a second part of the job. But like, for example, your buyer persona research will likely validate that most of the people you're trying to influence are on LinkedIn on a fairly regular basis. So, whether it's LinkedIn Campaign Manager, or LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or the two things together, there's a lot of creative ways to get that messaging in front of the right people that will give you the inside track on that particular company's budgeting process. Because as much as you see the pattern recognition, it's all culture. It's all company culture. It all depends on alignment. It depends on their stage of growth. It depends on the venture or private equity, whoever is on the ownership or in the board of directors role in that company. But if you want to be in on those conversations, I'd encourage you to think about using content and events as conversation starters. How do we convince customers, specifically convincing hyperscalers, to give up on self-construction? So I'm guessing your company builds data centers, and you probably find a lot of hyperscalers that want to build their own data centers, and you want to convince them that it's a much better idea to engage your company. Very similar to the question that I just answered. A lot of that is being able to use content resources, being able to position yourself as the go-to experts on data center construction, be able to, and long before they even know that your company exists, long before they even know that your category exists, getting to the first early signs that there's going to be a data center construction project. And this is where fleshing out the buyer personas for individual roles is incredibly important. But even before you get to deciding who your primary persona is, who your secondary persona is, if there's a tertiary persona, you're going to need to define the kind of companies that you want to target, your ideal client profile, your ICP. This will have a geographic component to it. Are you looking to build data centers worldwide? Or are you only building data centers in certain countries, or a specific country or a specific region with that company and within that country? So that's important. At a geographic level, size-wise, are there certain smaller hyperscalers versus larger hyperscalers are a good fit for you? For example, is your company really resourced to be able to sell directly to Google or AWS or Microsoft? Or are you going to do much better with a hyperscaler that's got a few dozen or a few hundred employees? Because again, like, you don't need tens of thousands of employees to be in the hyperscale business. In other words, you don't need tens of thousands of employees to do that. So again, pick your battles in terms of geography, in terms of company size. Are there certain business models based on regulatory factors or industries that could be a better fit than others? And then once you've defined at the company level what you're trying to do, you carve out who you're trying to build relationships with in those particular companies, the buyer personas, and then your buyer personas will help inform what the conversations that are going on in each of those stakeholders' minds that you want to be able to address with your educational content, with your events. Just to clarify, when I say events, this doesn't necessarily have to be webinars or live streams. It could be offline versions of that. A lot of companies do really, really well hosting their own educational events, their own symposiums, or much more casual things like breakfast seminars or lunch and learns. If you have your own facility with a conference room that sits 10 or 20 people, it's shockingly inexpensive to host your own educational, like, lunch and learn or breakfast seminar series on a regular basis. The key thing is to deliver a lot of value. So they're learning something, they're networking with some interesting people, and they want to be able to attend and want to keep bringing their coworkers and their boss and everything back. So just like with all of your content and events experiences, the goal is to make it so good, so remarkable, that they can't help about remarking about what you're doing to others that are part of that decision committee. So when it comes to convincing customers and convincing hyperscalers to give up on self-construction, get in early, get in often, be seen as the go-to experts on constructing hyperscale facilities with a great podcast, great webinars, great videos, great downloadable tools, great interactive tools, great ways to be able to show the insights and the level at which your team is able to operate and add value to those particular clients.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.